What we're talking about today is one of our core values, and it's this core value, that nobody's perfect. We saw that right there, that nobody's perfect. So the person to your right, person to your left, except that second row, whatever, person behind you, surely the person in front of you is not perfect. Remember that, though. That's one of our core values. And we see that with this story with Phil Robertson, don't we? You may have seen this Duck Dynasty thing. His story is powerful, though. That's why we're using it. Because before all of the fame, all of the duck calls, all of the camouflage, all of the family dinners, there was this broken guy that wasn't perfect. And at one point in his life, he just hit the bottom, like some of us have. He hit the bottom. And if you know this, sometimes you hit the bottom and God no longer becomes something that's way out there. It's like a vague idea. It's like, okay, God, where are you? I need you now. He came to that point. We'll get that. But here's the real point of the message today, and it's this. It's that the gospel at work is that grace doesn't wait for a clean record. That's a lie. If we're waiting for us to be clean before we come in and punch the grace card, you're waiting too long. And if you think that you have to clean up before you can use grace or walk into God's grace or accept God's grace, that's a lie, because grace actually meets you in your mess. That's why it's grace. That's why it's grace. You don't have to fake it. You don't have to perform. Anyone here good at faking things? A couple. Okay. You don't have to do that. We can talk about what's real. One of the things that we're very good at is running. Some of you are like, oh, I'm not a runner. But you are. But you are. Because we run from all kinds of things. And we see this, that even in Phil, and if you watch the movie, he actually is so down and out that he races a car to make money because he can't get a job any other way. The guy was a phenomenal athlete. His story is just crazy. But we're good runners too. Scripture says that at one point we were all dead in our transgressions. That we were dead in our transgressions, following the ways of this world. And that's often where we learn how to run really well. We'll run one way, and that probably won't get you what you want, so you'll run another way. We see that Phil, he ran for approval, and then he ran away from his failures, and then he ran from his pain. And you see how running can compound things a little bit. And then he ran to a substance because he couldn't run any further, so he ran to the substance of alcohol. And that's where he really, really hit rock bottom. And you're probably running from something, or you have in your life, but your running may look a little bit different. I don't know what your running looks like. Sometimes it's the busyness. You run with your busyness, or that's your thing that you run to. Could be silence. It could be alcohol. Could be your perfectionism. It could be the smile that you throw on all the time when people say hi to you, and you run to that mask that you wear so often. But when we pretend, it's just running in circles. Think about that for a minute. Pretending is just running in circles over and over and over. So we know his story, we know Phil's story, but in his story, when we watched it on TV, if you ever watched Duck Dynasty, you don't hear about everything. You don't hear about the huge transformational movement or moment that he had alone with God. They can't picture that. But it was in the stillness of his home. He was alone, and he came to the end of what he could manage and what he could cope with. And he realized that if he didn't stop running, that he would just lose everything. Everything would be gone. So my question for you today is, what are you running from? And what is God asking you to stop running from? Because I feel like even though we're believers, we can still run. Is that right? We still follow Jesus. We still make some mistakes, and we still find ways to run. Sometimes we mask them a little bit better. We put them where they're a little bit more socially acceptable. But sometimes we're still running. And we think that if we run and we run and we run, we'll either get tired or eventually we'll clean up. It's kind of how our brains work. Grace doesn't wait for you to get clean. God's grace is waiting for you right now, wherever you're at. But God demonstrates his own love for us while we were still sinners, while you were imperfect, while you were still sinners. Christ died for you. Christ died for me. That's the gospel. I'm going to bring a story in from the Old Testament this morning. How many of you know a person named Gomer? Anyone? Okay, if you don't, you're in for a treat. So there's Gomer. Yeah, exactly, right? I know I've never done this before, but today's the day. You'll find out while she's laughing in a second here. So there's Gomer, and there's also Hosea. Hosea was a prophet in the Old Testament. And so if you're reading your paper Bible, it's on the left side. If you cut middle, go left. That's where it's at. But it's an interesting relationship. You see, God spoke to Hosea about his love life in a weird way, about his family. And he said this. He says, go marry a woman who will be unfaithful to you and love her anyway. Think about that one, guys. No one's in line signing up for this. So Hosea, he marries Gomer. He follows what God tells him, and he marries Gomer. And then just as God had warned, what happens? She's gone. She leaves. Now, she's not just emotionally distant, okay? That would be nice for him probably. She's not having an emotional affair. She left her life and went to be a prostitute. Back to prostitution. So she chooses betrayal and she walks out. This is a dark story. I know, Sonny, when the movie was better than this, wasn't it? I'm sorry, I see your face and some of you are cringing for me. But it's so good when we get through it. I want you to think, if you're married, I want you to think of that heartbreak, though, for a minute. I want you to think of that, just to kind of just take a little bit of a step, not a real small step. Don't go, yeah, some of you don't go there. But just think about how bad that would be, that your spouse is not just drifting, because maybe you felt that your spouse kind of drifts away. You know, hey, are we okay? It's not a drift. It's a deliberate, I don't want to deal with you. I'm going to go do this. And while I do this, I know it's going to hurt you, type of a thing. So that's where we're at. God tells Hosea, he says, go. Go again, find her, pay the price to bring her home, basically. Let that sink in for just a minute. Not only has she left him, she's not just lost, she's for sale. She's for sale. Hosea, with his heart shattered, he buys her back, not as punishment, but as this restoration. Not because she deserves it, but because God is writing a bigger story, and he's using this story as an example. And the story is the story of God's relentless love. That's what it is. We can read it. It says, so I bought her, and I said, you are to live with me and be mine. I'm paraphrasing that, but this is such a heart of grace at this point. It's not a handshake deal. It's actually a pursuit. It cost him something. Not only did it cost him money, but can you imagine the reputation? Can you imagine what would happen in our circles if someone did this? Did you hear about Pastor Jim? Did you hear about Sarah? They're back together. But think about how personal this is. Now, back to the blind, back to Phil. He was not a prophet. That's not what he was. But like Gomer, he had wandered away. He had wandered deep into sin, betrayal, and destruction. And yet when grace came to him, it wasn't just a transaction. Because so often we think of it as a transaction. Grace is so personal to us. It sounded like, you don't have to keep living this way. I paid the price for you. It's time to come home. Now, for you, it may be that you stop seeing yourself as a lost cause. You're not a lost cause. And to start seeing yourself as someone that God went to the cross to buy back. And this connects directly to what's happening later on today. Because of his great love, God made us alive with Christ when we were dead. When we were dead. Phil's story also echoes another story in Scripture, and that's one in the New Testament. There's this guy named Peter. If you don't know your Bible, I'll tell you the story. Peter is one of Jesus' closest friends. And at one point he said, I'm going to be with you to the end. I'm your guy. Have you ever had a friend that you thought would be with you to the end? That person? I think I had more of those in my 20s than I surely do now. Yeah, we're going to ride or die. They rode. Right? You may have had some of those. That's kind of what Peter did. One night, denies Jesus 3 times. 3 times. And it wasn't just like he did that on the side. It was a pretty public denial. He told people, I don't know him. Had to be humiliating. But in the middle of this, Jesus didn't cancel Peter. I've put myself in Jesus' place in this one. I would have been like, I'm probably done with you. I gave you 3 chances. How many of you go 3-strike rule? Some of you are like, yeah, 2 is my number, 3, 1. Some of you are like, 1, but I don't want to tell anybody. Brings them back. He has breakfast with them. In John 21, this is after the resurrection, they have breakfast together. And the man who failed Jesus gets to have breakfast with Jesus. And then he asks them these 3 questions. Jesus asks 3 questions. He says, do you love me? And each time Peter replies, well, Jesus replies, feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. Not you're forgiven, not, you know what, why don't you follow James and John around a little bit and figure this out, because they didn't deny me. That wasn't what it was. He actually said, all right, let's go build this kingdom together. I'm going to restore you. I'm going to show you grace in the middle of this very difficult time, because that's how God rebuilds things. That's how God rebuilds our life. But it starts with grace. It starts with second chances. And then there's this trust. And a key part of it that we can't overlook is the honesty. Because eventually we have to come full circle and look at what's going on. Just like Peter, Phil, he had to face what he broke. Instead of shame keeping him stuck, honesty became the key to his healing. He was honest with himself. He became honest with his wife, Kay. But sometimes we feel disqualified, just like Peter, because you may have missed something in your faith journey. I don't know what it is. You may have swung and missed. You may be carrying around a secret sin. You may be doing something that, if you think people knew, that Jesus wouldn't even love you. That's just not the case. Can you imagine that when Jesus meets us, it's not with a lecture, which the church is so well known for, but it's actually with an invitation. And the invitation is just like the prodigal son coming to his father. And you remember that story. We taught about it not long ago. While he was yet a long way off, the father saw him and was filled with compassion. If you could have a mental picture of Jesus and God the Father, I would ask you to have one of compassion and not one of judgment. Because so many times in our life, those people that we see in authority over us, we see God in authority over us many times similar to that, but they weren't perfect. They were so imperfect that they actually may have scarred your version of a perfect father. So I'd ask that you change your gears a little bit and look to a more compassionate and more of a loving God. It's not a distant God waiting for us to clean up. It's actually someone who sprints at us to close the distance to get to us faster. And in that moment, there's no speeches. There's no lectures. There's just wide open arms. Wide open arms. Phil described his awakening like almost like being hunted. That's how his brain worked. And it wasn't by shame, but it was actually he was hunted by mercy. And the fact that he couldn't outrun grace. And then once he came to his end, once he realized the truth, he took the next step. Church, you don't grow spiritually by accident. You know that, right? You just don't wake up one day and you're like, I'm an amazing Christian. That happened. That was a great sleep. Everything, I look good in the mirror, and I'm a perfect Christian. That's not how it works. It actually takes you being intentional. It's intentional choices time after time after time. I'm going to give you just a few because practical applications, they make things clear sometimes. The first one is this: clear the mask. This week, be vulnerable with someone that you trust. Talk to them. Show them a small truth. Be brave with that relationship. Open up a little bit. Number 2, name your run. What are you running from? I don't know what your run is, but journal it. Then pray that you stop. Pray for that courage. Even that little whisper, hey, here I am, God, can count. Sometimes we think we have to do these big sweeping changes. I'm a big sweeping change guy. I am. That's the way I am. I want everything to be bigger and planned out before I take the first step. And sometimes it's doing the first right step. As small as it may be, and it may be just be, here I am, God. I don't know what to do. I want to stop running. I want more of you. Open the door. Sometimes you owe someone an apology. Take care of it. We're adults. Put the pride down. Bring the apology out. If you need to talk about forgiveness, we can talk about that at a different day. But sometimes that's going to be messy. Sometimes you're still afraid. Do it anyway. It's worth it for you to deal with stuff that may be causing you to run a little bit. Last thing, lean into grace. Lord, I'm not worthy. I still need you. I need you again today. Lord, I'm counting on your righteousness in me today. Church, nobody is perfect. That's our value for today. That's the movie for this week. But grace doesn't wait, and grace doesn't quit. I think we think both of those things sometimes. You don't have to earn your way home. You can come just as you are. Not only you, but those around you. I don't know about you, but sometimes I look at people in a way that I shouldn't. I don't look at them with Jesus' eyes. I look at them with Jim eyes. And Jim eyes think, I don't know about that one. But Jesus' eyes are like, that's one of mine. You just don't see it yet. There's more going on there than you know.